The Greenville County School Board's Committee of the Whole meeting for June the 11th to order. Thank everybody for being here. The first item of business in order is the consent calendar. Is there a
Motion to approve.
I have a motion properly made and seconded to accept the consent calendar as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Our next item of business in order is the instructional portion of today's agenda, scheduled to be chaired by Dr. O'Connor, who is out of town. So unless one of you are violently in favor of chairing this, I'll take care of it. I don't see any volunteers. Anybody jumping at the table, so I'll take care of it. Do we have any appearance of visitors? You go to Florida and everything just falls apart.
I'm going to guess no.
I would imagine since everybody in here is staff, unless Eric Williams was to come up and say something, I guess we have nobody. Okay, we have nobody this morning, so we will move to the next item of business in order, which is item 2.02, extracurricular activities. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. From time to time, we'd like to keep you all updated on the status of our extracurricular, co-curricular activities. As you all know, it is one of the greatest avenues that we have to develop leadership, to develop teamwork, to enhance academics. Of all the things that we do with students, it provides great opportunity. There is, as you know, considerable research that shows that students that are involved in the kinds of activities that we're going to talk with you a little bit about this morning, not only do they perform better academically in school, they are more likely to remain in school and graduate, they are more likely to have better attendance, and they're less likely to have disciplinary issues. It is, as I've often heard said in the past, one of the most cost-effective at-risk programs that any school district can offer. So today we've asked Coach Nance and Mr. Wingate to present on our extra and co-curricular activities. Coach, I believe Coach Nance is first.
Yes, sir. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
What we're going to do today is kind of give you an idea of there we go, kind of synopsis of what occurred this past year with the extracurricular and co-curricular activities. So as you can see on the screen today, we offer a full athletic program at all of our high schools. 8 of the high schools actually do field all 22 varsity sports. 6 of the high schools do not. Generally, it's an interest issue, primarily centered around lacrosse or swimming. There's not enough interest at some of the schools to offer those sports, but it is offered. Opportunities are there for supplements if there's enough interest from the schools to participate in that. And then you see middle schools, we offer 7 sports there: volleyball, boys and girls basketball, soccer, baseball, softball. So each of those are there. Our participation rate for 2018-2019, we had 2,037 middle school students participate in middle school only. Those 7 sports had about 2,000, well, did have 2,037 participants. The high school, we have approximately 9,500 participants. In the high school, that also includes not just the high school age kids, but 7th and 8th grade kids who do move up to run cross country or swim, maybe play D-team football, track, JV wrestling, things like that. There's another 1,000 middle school kids in that number. So about 9,500 participants at the high school level or participating with high school sports. You see we have 1,037 paid coaches this year and approximately 250 volunteer coaches throughout the district. The district fielded 616 teams this year, 483 different teams at the high school level and 133 middle school teams. And when I go out and speak at different places and I try to explain to people the size of our organization and what we do, and when I tell them that we have 616 teams, 1,200 plus coaches, and 11,000 athletes, their jaws drop. They don't understand how we can do that. But and then they're really impressed at what we can do and what we offer here. Just wanted you to see those numbers there. And then I hit them with this, our academic performance, because we track that academic performance for all of our varsity level teams. Our GPA this year was a 3.90 across the board. That's about 5,800 varsity athletes at a 3.90. We had 140 teams that had a 4.0 or better GPA. 7 complete athletic departments had a 4.0 or higher GPA. And our GPA numbers have increased each year that we've done this challenge. So we've partnered with Greenville Drive to do this GPA challenge for the last 4 years. And to give you an idea, 4 years ago our GPA was 371, then it went to 373, then it went to 379, and this year it's at 390. We went from 70 to 91 to 115 to 140 teams with a 4.0. And we went from 3 to 4 to 5 to now 7 athletic departments. And I really thought this was going to be a successful program 4 years ago when we started this, but I knew it was going to work the first year we were there. And I was standing at the board where we had all those signs up for what teams made what. And a couple of kids from one of our schools realized that they lost to their rival school in the academic challenge. And they don't know who I am. I was just standing there and I heard these kids say, "We're going to beat them next year in this." I mean, it's just the type of competitiveness that these kids had, that they were competing against each other in the GPA challenge as well. So we're very excited about the growth of this program. Our athletic success this year, we had 22 region championships among our 14 high schools, 12 upper state, and 8 state championships. About 19 kids won individual championships, whether in wrestling, track, or swimming. And according to the numbers sent to me by the athletic directors, we had 169 athletic scholarship signings. Now, I realize on the printout you got, there may have been a typo there, the region championships. I think your printout said 162. That was an error. I was trying to do 16 plus 2 as they were coming in, and it just morphed into 162. It's really 22. Certifications. One of the things that we want is our athletic directors and coaches to gather certification to make themselves, invest in themselves and be a little more proficient. So the National Interscholastic Athletic Administration Association has 3 different levels. The registered level, which is RAA, and we've got 1 high school administrator and 6 middle school administrators who are at that level. And we've got several new ones this year, so that our numbers aren't going to match up. We will not be fully staffed or fully certified with our staff this year. But by the time we start in August, they will be, because they will have the classes taken this summer. So we'll have about 6 more RAAs by the time we get to August. We have 2 registered middle school athletic administrators, which means they have a specific certification for middle school sports. They've done some extra work in that RAA category. And then you have the CAA, which is certified. A certified athletic administrator has to take a minimum of 5 leadership training courses and pass a national exam. And 11 of our high schools and 4 of our middle school administrators have done that. And then the ultimate level is the certified master. So they take, after passing that national exam, they then take several more courses and they have to do a project. Right now we have 1 CMAA among our 14 high school administrators, and we have 4 that are working towards that certified master level. Then we have the National Federation of High Schools offers something called an accredited interscholastic coach. And that is a process where they would take 3 online courses. 1 is going to be in their sports-specific area, 1 in a coaching area, and 1 in a health safety area. And what we've done is taken some professional development money and kind of gone after a group of coaches. So all of our football coaches we now have 2 new head football coaches, so we'll be training them this summer, so they'll be up to date. And all of our volleyball coaches have attained the AIC designation. So there is a second level, a CIC, that we encourage them to go for, which requires a couple more online courses. But this year we're going for high school softball coaches and middle school coaches in softball will go for this year's AIC level. And then just some of the leadership positions that our high school athletic administrators participate in. You know, a couple of years ago, we went to full-time athletic administrators at the high school level, which has been a great thing for them to get more involved in some of the leadership across the state. So we have one AD on the athletic administrator board, 3 basketball board members, one's on the 5A committee, a couple of treasurers. So you see that they're getting more involved in the leadership positions of their boards to help oversee their sport, understand the rules, work within the rules, amending the rules for the high school league. A number of these guys are very influential across the state. And then we have a middle school AD at every school, and then we have a lead AD for each middle school sport. So one of the things I did was try to create leadership opportunities and growth opportunities for these middle school ADs. So we set up a situation where for every sport, volleyball, basketball, et cetera, there is a lead AD. So for example, Justin Garone, who is at Fisher Middle, Justin is the lead AD for boys basketball. So he collects the boys basketball scores, gets them to the website, gets the rankings of the teams, the won-loss stuff. He gets that taken care of. Any questions by the coaches or about the schedule for basketball goes to him first, and then he'll come to me and we'll work through the answer if he needs any help. But we've done this to one, get them some leadership opportunity, growth opportunity, and to get them some points towards earning their CAA certification as well. And it has worked really, really well. They've done a great job with that. We also have a schedule committee that tries to manage the middle school schedule to make sure their travel's not too bad, make sure they understand their region groupings. And we have a handbook committee. So we created a group that went together and tried to write a handbook just for middle school sports to encourage sportsmanship and to encourage the growth of their area. So it's been a very good thing with those middle school ADs. Just wanted to mention some of the partnerships we have. We have a partnership with National Amateur Sports. It's a group out of Charlotte, North Carolina, that tries to gather sponsorships for us and get groups to support us. We have a great partnership with USA Football and the Carolina Panthers. Just this past Friday, we concluded our 4th Heads Up certification football opportunity, I guess. We had 73 of our football coaches came. All 14 head coaches were there, offensive and defensive coordinators, JV coaches, C-team head coaches, and D-team head coaches. And that's a request that I made to make sure that anybody who was responsible for teaching blocking and tackling was safety certified. And when we talked to USA Football about it, they're like, well, we only want one safety coach. We only typically have one safety coach per school. And I said, I understand that. That's really good, but I want more than that. We want anybody responsible for that team to be safety certified. And the Carolina Panthers outreach guy was standing there with the USA Football guy when I explained that to him, and he looked at me and he said, I'll pay for it. So the last 3 years, the Panthers paid for the entire program. This year, under new ownership, they've kind of amended their partnership and what they paid for. But they paid for the online portion of the training to make sure our coaches are safety certified. And to give you an idea of what that means to us, 6 years ago, our loss ratio in insurance exceeded 50%. All right, so we were paying $375,000, $400,000 in insurance payments for athletics, and the payout by the insurance company exceeded over 50% of that. So over a couple $100,000 they were paying back out. This past year, our loss ratio, or their loss ratio, which I equate as our injury ratio, is sub 20%. And by getting this certification, our concussion ratio has dropped from 6.1 to 4.0. Now, I'm not a math person. I taught social studies. But if you tell me it went from 6.1 to 4.0, I see that as that's 2.1 less concussions we would have. That's really not what it was. The research on that was it was by a factor of 2.1, an exponential factor. So our concussion ratio and injury ratio has vastly been reduced due to in many ways due to this certification. but making our coaches more aware of this, and then being able to teach a safer method of football. So we feel really, really good about this. We've actually had 3 different articles that we've written in conjunction with the Greenville Hospital System published in medical journals on the success of our program. So we feel really, really positive about that relationship. Obviously, we have the Greenville Drive partnership with our academic awards. And this year we had a partnership with Greenville Automotive Group, which is Toyota of Greenville, Nissan, Lexus, and Jaguar Land Rovers group on Lawrence Road. They sponsored us for a couple of events, including live streaming of a football game each week. And then they gave us some money for scholarships. So what they asked for was athletes who were not going to get a college scholarship for athletics, but athletes who understood the demands it took, goal setting, et cetera, and then that were going to go straight into the workforce, most likely, or wanted to go to Greenville Tech or a like institution to get a certification, and they would offer them preferred employment back. It's kind of a really unique partnership between athletics and Kate. And you know we're college and career ready, right? So what we've found is we have 6 kids. We have not yet awarded the scholarships. We're waiting on 1 kid to decide whether he wants to go to Greenville Tech or whether he wants to go straight into the workforce. But we will have 3 kids who will get $2,500 scholarships to go to Greenville Tech, and 3 kids who are going to go straight into the workforce, and that $2,500 scholarship will be used to help buy their tools, which I didn't really understand you had to buy their own tools, but their tools are in excess of $9,000 to $10,000. So this will help them towards the purchase of their tools. To give you an idea of just how good this is, one of the managers from Nissan went and met with Golden Strip, a kid from Golden Strip, to interview him to see if he was interested in a scholarship. The interview was at 1 o'clock. The guy called me at 1:33 and said, give him the money. I've hired him on the spot. 30 minutes in an interview, and he hired him. He said, that kid is really good, and he has a passion for what he wants to do, and your guys are ready to work. So we were J.F. Lucas called me and was just ecstatic that happened. So that's a great partnership we have. Some of the events we put on this past year, of course, we had the Games Plus Athletic Summit down at the Bon Secours Arena, which had Greg Dale and Sandy Morris, who were our speakers that day. In November, we had Dan Asa come down from Indianapolis. He has a company called Core Course GPA to work with all of our guidance counselors and athletic directors on NCAA eligibility. Jay Hammis, who runs a company called Safe Sport Zone from Racine, Wisconsin, came down in November also and did an athletic safety presentation for all of our safety administrators, athletic directors, and some of the SROs that were here. And then we did a leadership breakfast where we had Todd Gongwer, who's an author, leadership speaker, who came in, did a leadership breakfast with us in the early spring that had a bunch of our players, coaches were there. Some really nice events we did there. For you, the athletic support you give from the district, as I mentioned earlier, we have full-time athletic directors at the high school level. We also have the full supplement schedule for all sports, extra duty supplements for those that advance in the playoffs. As they work longer, they get a little bit extra money, 1/15 of their salary for their extra time. Transportation budget is provided for all schools, the field maintenance contract, district grass cutting, gym floor resurfacing and maintenance, scoreboard maintenance and replacement, irrigation maintenance and replacement, and all of those, I'm trying to think, the last, last 5 bullets, the second bullet, are all in the last 3 years that you added. We've added, the transportation budget was expanded 2 years ago, so you see tremendous growth there. And then track maintenance, tennis court maintenance, the activity bus service and replacement plan, field lighting, all were added in the last 3 years as well. And then we, of course, repair baseball, the softball dugouts, press boxes, and any other repairs as needed. So the commitment that has been made to support extracurricular activities has been tremendous by the board and, of course, well received all across. Some totals here, about $2.95 million for athletic supplements. $410,000 for the middle school supplements, and the middle school support is about $89,900. It's $600 per team, so each middle school receives $4,200 in supplementary support, plus $5 per athlete. So typically, they get that $4,200 at the beginning of the year to order their things with, uniforms and whatnot, and then the $5 per athlete at the end of the year. When we know how many athletes they have, we send them that money. That usually pays for their banquets and their awards and things at the end of the year. Transportation amount, you can see, so a total of about 3.6 in athletic support right there. And that ends my presentation.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
So looking on the arts and academics side, you can see on the arts side we have band and chorus at all of our high schools. We have orchestra at 12 of the schools, theater in 11, and dance is offered at the Fine Arts Center. And on the academic, extra and co-curricular activities, we have academic teams at 12 of our high schools, ROTC at 7, speech and debate 7, robotics 7, and of course yearbook is at all of the high schools, and newspaper at 6. There are a ton of other activities that are offered at the schools, like Beta Club and National Art Honor Society, and all of those things. We didn't include them in this presentation because it got to be really, really large, but those are the main activities that we have. Just so that you know, if you have the actual presentation in the PowerPoint or in the Google slide, if you click up at the top where it says High School Arts and Academic Programs, you can actually click and see which high schools have which programs if you're interested in that. And it'll be the same thing for middle and elementary when I get there. On the elementary side, we have band at all of our middle schools. Orchestra is offered at 18 of those middle schools and also through the ARMS program that I'll tell you about in just a little bit. And chorus is offered at 20 of the middle schools. Theater is a little less. We're in 15 schools there. Dance is offered at one school, which is League Academy, and through the ARMS program. And then robotics, which has had a big uptick in the last couple of years, is actually offered at 10 middle schools. On the elementary side, obviously we have chorus at all of our elementary schools, and again, robotics has really taken off over the last couple of years. It's now being offered at 20 schools. And then everything on the far right side, which is orchestra, theater, and dance, that's offered at Stone Academy and also through the ARMS program. So the ARMS program is an acronym for Arts Reaching Middle and Elementary Students. It's for artistically talented, gifted and talented students, 3rd through 8th grade. Through the program, we offer orchestra, dance, theater, visual art, and creative writing. Students can be nominated by their teacher or by their parent or anybody, but if they're nominated, then they must also audition into the program. Those students meet at the Fine Arts Center 2 to 3 days a week on an alternating schedule, so they're either Monday, Wednesday, and then Friday, or either Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So Friday is the day that alternates. We serve approximately 400 students, 3rd through 8th grade, and inside of the program there are 6 teachers and 1 part-time administrator that's shared with the Fine Arts Center. So when you look at the total picture of participants at the high school level for arts and academics, you can see we have 5,764 participants. And it's important to note that there are going to be some students who are counted in arts, some students who are counted in academics, some students who count in both. Then there may be some students who are arts, academics, and athletics. So rather than saying students, we actually said participants. Okay. On the arts side, there's 4,082 participants, and on the academic side, there's 1,682. On the middle school side, you can see middle school is by far the largest. I think that's probably because that's where students a lot of times expand their choices. They have lots of options there. Middle school a lot of times is the place where students like to try to see if they like participating in activities. So on the arts, extra and co-curricular side, we have 9,273. And on the academic side, 1,026. And again, like high school, you're going to have some students that cross over between arts, academics, and sometimes even athletics. So the total for middle school is 10,299. On the elementary side, we have 3,223 on the arts side and roughly 597 on the academic side for a total of 3,820. And most of those, just so that if you're wondering, most of those on the academic side are going to be robotics, and most of those on the arts side are going to be chorus. So when you look at the entire K-12 spectrum for arts and academics, we have roughly 19,883 participants across all of the grade levels. And again, you can see middle school is by far the largest, and it levels out a little bit there at high school. So as you start delving into the actual arts side, you can see how that breaks down. For band, for middle school and high school, we have roughly 4,459 students. That number has steadily increased over the last 6 years. Those high school numbers 6 years ago they were hanging around 850, 900 students, and we're up to 1,240 now. The middle school side was hanging around 2,500, 2,400. I have to go back and look exactly, but we definitely have seen an uptick in the enrollment piece there. On the orchestra side, we do offer orchestra, like I said, at Stone Academy at the elementary level, but that's the only school at the elementary level. And then for middle school and high school, you can see the numbers there for a total of 2,367 students. And like band, that number has steadily risen over the last several years. On the chorus side, those numbers are going to be the biggest, and I think the reason for that is because obviously we start kids singing as soon as they walk in the front door of the school in kindergarten, and it doesn't cost any money to have a voice. So parents who are interested in having their students participate, it's a much more accessible activity. So a total of 6,683 students are part of the choral programs in our schools. Theater, we've seen a surge in theater over the last several years, some really strong pockets of strong programs across the district. We have a total of 2,367 students across the three different levels there. And dance we have roughly 702 students. And dance in our district is offered at Stone Academy, League Academy, and at the Fine Arts Center. And so when you go over to the academic side, like I said, you can see there on the robotics, we implemented a robotics supplement, I think it was 4 years ago, and those numbers have steadily increased. I saw a huge surge in the number of schools at the middle school level and at the elementary level, specifically over the last 2 years of schools asking for a supplement for their particular programs there. So a total of 1,750 kids are participating in robotics. We did expand the robotics option. It was at one time just FIRST robotics, and now we've included VEX and the other robotics programs. On the ROTC, we have that at 7 of our high schools with 954 participants, and the different programs include Army, Navy, and Air Force. We have 12 high schools that have academic teams with 157 participants, and 7 high schools with speech and debate that have 155. And again, if you go back to that first slide where it shows high school, you can just click on the link and you can see all of the high schools that have these particular programs. We have newspaper at 6 of our schools with 45 participants, and of course yearbook at all of our schools with 244 participants. When it comes down to the support that you guys have graciously provided to us, we have a full supplement schedule for all of the activities that you see there. The transportation budget, as Darrell said, was increased 2 years ago, 3 years ago, somewhere along in there. We have $115,500 available, and that's for arts and academics. And that money is sent to the schools, and the principals divide it at their discretion across the different activities in their building, as it's needed. On the marching band side, we send $1,808 directly to each school for operating expenses, and then there's another pot of money of $70,000 that's divided up here at the district level based off of the student enrollment, so it's on a per-pupil ratio. We added marching band uniforms 3 years ago, and that's $105,000 a year, and they're on a 7-year rotation cycle, so every 7 years, bands will get a new set of uniforms. And then we also added the marching band adjunct instructor several years ago, and that's on a 50-to-1 ratio. So for every 50 kids they have in their marching band program, they'll get one of those district supplements, which this year, I looked yesterday for the new supplement schedule, and that's sitting right around $6,200, which is very competitive across the state. Each high school receives $2.48 per student enrolled in the school for arts programs, and that's divided at the principal's discretion. I've seen that done 1,000 different ways. Sometimes the principal may say all of the money is going to one particular program that has a specific need for that year, or they may divide it up on a per pupil ratio, or, there's a lot of different ways that they can do that, but we do send $2.48 per student to each school. The next several bullets there, the band instrument repair, the piano tunings, and the band and string instruments, I have separate slides on those, so I'll go into more detail on that, but we do provide money for that. And each middle school band program receives $440. And on the speech and debate side, each program receives $750 plus $10 for each student that's registered with the National Speech and Debate Association. So looking specifically at instrument repair, so this is just to repair instruments that are currently owned by the district. You can see high school bands are at $10,000, middle school bands $21,250. Of course, if you remember the numbers, middle school band is much larger than high school band, so it's based off of a per pupil ratio. Orchestra is at $6,000, and middle school orchestra is at $14,250, and we provide one free piano tuning per school each year, and that roughly runs right around $5,000. You guys graciously approved three or 4 years ago money to buy new instruments each year, and that was after we did the $1.9 million to kind of get everybody back to a level playing field. And so each year we have $150,000 for new instruments. That includes for band and strings. And in order to best serve all programs, what I decided to do was to alternate it. So 1 year middle school programs, band and strings will receive money. The following year, high school programs will receive the money, and then we go back to middle school. So we just alternate back and forth each year. And that is on a per pupil ratio. All total, when you look at the total amount of supplements that we spend, it's roughly $869,804 across arts and academics. And then the actual money that is either sent to the schools or the money that sits here at the district level for the budgets for arts and academics is $689,277 for a grand total of roughly $1,559,081. Like Darrell, we have a number of professional organizations that we associate with, and those include the National Association for Music Education, which is kind of the umbrella for the South Carolina Music Educators Association and the South Carolina Band Directors Association. There's also the South Carolina Theater Association, First Robotics, VEX Robotics, National Speech and Debate Association, and SCAFORD, which is actually the PE organization that oversees all PE, but they also encompass dance as well. And then in addition to all of the state and national level events that our programs participate in, we have a number of district-wide events that we support. The Greenville County Youth Orchestra, that's a 5-tier honors orchestra system, and we serve roughly 250 kids through that. All-County Band, All-County Orchestra, District Honors Choir, Spring Sing, which is a partnership that we have with the Pleasantburg Rotary, our District Theater Festival, our District Marching Band Exhibition, and then, of course, our 3 juried art shows, and then especially the high school juried art show that we partner with Artisphere on. And then just some of our community partners that we have strong relationships with include the Peace Center, the Greenville Symphony Orchestra. The symphony sends in either an individual or a small ensemble into each elementary school to do free performances. The Warehouse Theater, Pleasantburg Rotary, like I said, they partner with us on Spring Sing. They basically provide all of the expenses for Spring Sing. If you've ever been, you know what the size of the event and you know how much that encompasses. The Music Club of Greenville, they provide an instrument donation program where their members go out into the community, they collect used instruments, they have them repaired, and then they donate them to our schools with the highest need. If you've seen the uptick in terms of the size and the quality of the program at Tanglewood, that's largely due to the donations that came directly from the Music Club of Greenville. Roughly 95 to 98% of the students that are participating in that program are using instruments that came from the Music Club of Greenville. And also the Metropolitan Arts Council. And that's what I have.
Thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Oyster, you have anything to close with?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. Certainly any questions that you all might have, we will answer.
Michelle?
I have a question about the presentation you just did. I tried to click on that link and it won't give us access. So I need to know which of the, when you have the 12 high schools, which 2 high schools are not participating in these events? Because it said access denied. We can't get access to that link.
Okay, I can double check to make sure that you have access, but are you talking about which?
It's only access for people with Greenville County schools, so you need to change that to anybody with
Okay, yeah, I can do that as soon as we're done today. But specifically, are you talking about which?
You have, let me go back to it. You said that, okay, most of the things like orchestra and theater and all of that, that number 12 kept coming up for the high schools. And
So
we
is
have
it-
14 high schools.
Correct,
Which,
yeah. So
which
so
high
that's
schools
gonna-
don't
That's going to
participate?
vary from activity to activity. I can tell you on the orchestra side, right now, Carolina and Travelers Rest are the two without orchestra.
What about theater?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I should know that, but there's when you add up all the arts disciplines, it's a lot. But I can definitely go back and make that accessible to you. You have it. Okay, theater right now, the ones that do not have an active program would be Blue Ridge, Greer, and Southside.
Okay. What about with elementary? You have that 51 participate. We have 52 schools. Which one on in chorus?
Well,
Chorus?
we only have 51 elementary schools.
Oh, I thought I counted 52.
Yeah.
Y'all don't count Washington Center as one of the schools?
So Washington Center doesn't necessarily have, they have a music teacher, but they don't have a choral program per se.
Okay. Okay. And for the, that's all I have for you, but
Okay.
for the sports side, I see that you say that, you know, you're certified athletic administrators and ADs, they have these certifications, but are they doing with the students of what's next, what's the next level, like the clearinghouse and stuff like that? They are versed in that for these student athletes?
Yes, ma'am. That's part of why we had Dan Asa come in from Core Course GPA, the guy that came in from Indianapolis. We had him come in and do an afternoon session with a guidance counselor and the athletic director to make sure they understood what the current requirements are, what a 48H form is, what our district 48H is, things like that. And one of the things that I recommended each athletic administrator do at their school was to have a bulletin board or some type of display that had Division 1, 2, 3 requirements and have a list of the acceptable courses to take so that kids knew what was good, what class was going to count. And that's has been a very successful thing for us because I've gotten multiple calls from parents over the course of the year, and mostly from guidance counselors who remember what was going on, and they're asking questions to make sure.
Now,
that
how do they communicate that to the parents? If you have that in the school, if you have that display in the school, how do they communicate that to the parents?
Yes, ma'am.
In order for them to help that child with like the clearinghouse and stuff like that?
Yes, ma'am. It should be on every school's website. It should be in the athletic website for every school. But also each coach, we give them a script basically for a preseason meeting. And each coach is required to have a preseason meeting with his parents and team, his or her team. And we that's part of one of the things that we talk about in that preseason meeting is to understand what the requirements are, and if you have any questions, to follow up with either your guidance counselor, your athletic director, or the coach. The Core Course GPA is a program that schools can buy to use. Some of them do. But the NCAA Eligibility Center has a free calculator on its website, and we give them all that information. That any kid can go on to the NCAA Eligibility Center and start typing in create a login and put their core courses in, their grades in, and it'll give them a prediction. They will qualify, they won't qualify, what they need, things like. And that's free. It's just on the NCAA website.
And they communicate that to the students, the ADs,
Yes, ma'am.
the
Yes,
coaches
ma'am.
do?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Lewis?
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. One, it's really exciting to see what's happening with the band program, and I think that that is really a testament to both what you're doing and what's happening at the schools. I mean, you can see on the field the growth that's happened over the last few years, and I'm really excited about that. I had a question about just a couple of numbers, though, in the band budget. Can we go back to that slide?
There?
This one.
Mm-hmm.
So each marching band gets allocated $1,808 per year. Is
Per
that
year.
is that what that allocation is?
Right.
And then the 70,000 is broken up among all the schools based on the enrollment.
Right.
The enrollment of the school or the enrollment of
Enrollment of
band
the
members?
program. So what I do is I typically wait until the end of the first week of band camp because those numbers always fluctuate. You know, sometimes they may think they're going to have 102 and they end up with 78, or
Sure.
they may think they're going to have 82 and they end up with 120.
Okay.
Just depends. So I usually wait till the end of the first week of band camp. I do a total head count across all the programs, add up that total number, and then I take that and divide it into the 70,000 to give me a per pupil expenditure. And then from there, I just multiply back out based off of their enrollment, how much that actual allocation would be.
Okay. And I know a few years ago we used some of our revenue expense of excessive expenses to cover like a shot in the arm for
Right.
our marching band equipment.
Right.
Now we have allocated funds
Right.
to replace that equipment.
Mhm.
So is it your opinion that the funds that we're allocating are adequate to cover the replacement cycle for the equipment that we all purchased at once, or should we be looking back at that
absolutely.
again?
Thinking back to that, because that was 4 years ago, when you're asked to do something like that, you have no idea,
Right.
what all you're really getting into. So the only instrument that I was not able to purchase when we did that for all the schools were oboes. I had to take something off just because I thought that we had everything covered. But schools have been able to go back over this first two cycles and buy whatever it is that those individual needs were. When we did the 1.9 million, we basically said every school must have, and then we just right down the list of basic instrumentation, so that regardless of who the band director may be, over the next 15, 20 years, we could ensure that all of that, high dollar equipment was there.
Okay.
So now the directors have full autonomy to choose whatever it is that they need to buy. So, what I'm seeing now is some of the directors are actually using their funds to purchase things like instruments that students would normally purchase, like flutes and clarinets and saxophones, because you're going to always have kids that
Okay.
couldn't necessarily afford their own.
Okay.
So yes, to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I think it is adequate. Yes.
So each school is choosing how to use its budget to
Mhm.
replace instruments that it feels like
Yeah.
are needed for that
Right.
particular band.
Yeah, and what I do is I typically work with one of our national vendors, and I come up with a list of different brands for them to choose from. And again, they have that total dollar amount based off of their program enrollment, and then they can choose based off of the list of what the cost is, whatever it is that they need for their particular program at this
Okay.
point.
Can we? Sorry.
Well, if I might add to that, while it's sufficient now, at some point, a couple of years out, we're going to need to adjust that amount as those instruments
Right.
age out.
Well, I just
but
wondered-
right now, it's a sufficient amount.
I guess I was just wondering from the perspective of the growth that the program is seeing. If we're seeing, I think we talked about like a 30% growth in students. Do we need to look at a 30% growth in our allocation?
So I think the way that probably needs to be handled, because what we're seeing is there's growth in pockets. Some
Okay.
programs, like for example, I'll use Wade Hampton since Mr. Williams is in the room. In 4 years, they went from 25, 30 kids up to 100. So I mean, it was big. So what I tried to do with those individual directors are when there are specific needs for those things, either I try to find money within my own budget outside of this 150,000, or I've had situations where I've been able to reach out in other directions to find those particular things,
Okay.
to be able to use those.
Thanks. Can we talk about sports for a second? So help me understand. So we allocate. These were new numbers that I've never seen before. So $2.95 million is allocated to high school athletics. Is that where that? Did I see that number right?
That was the total amount of supplementary pay.
Okay, and so that is strictly money that's going towards the coaches' supplements for if you coach lacrosse or whatever,
Yes, sir.
in addition to your teaching pay.
Yes, sir. Mhm.
So aside from the money that we allocate for transportation and fields and coaches' supplements, everything else is raised at the school level? Is that am I missing, is there another pocket of money that's high school athletic allocations besides those kind of three
Oh,
big
it's,
buckets?
Everything that Coach Nance has listed there are the direct allocations. And we didn't go back and cost out the things like field maintenance and grass cutting, gym
Right.
floor resurfacing. All those things are within the maintenance budget or within the MARS budget. For example, resurfacing tracks at whatever point they have to be. I think it's about a 5-year interval. They have to have some fairly significant additional surfacing. And then, what is it, 7 to 10, they have to be completely resurfaced. We don't have that costed out on here, but those would be the only other things. There's nothing going to a school to support athletics other than what's spelled out there, either with an amount beside it or without an amount.
Okay.
To your point, everything else they do is on gate receipts or booster club support from their athletic booster club.
Okay. So if I look at a sport like football, then the uniform, the helmet, the paying the refs, the equipment that they need to practice with, like all of that is being raised at the local
it's all
school
local level. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Security for their events.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
a base requirement for a certain amount for them to have present based on the size of the event.
Okay.
But all that comes out of the gate receipts.
So to me, it seems like potentially that could put us in kind of a never-ending spiral, like a downward spiral here. That if your athletic team isn't appropriately funded, then your team may not perform as well. So your gate receipts might be lower, which means your booster club might be less interested in. I mean, it seems like we have two things that are both determined. Two funding amounts that are both determined by the success of the performance on the field, that may be negatively affecting how one school can be competitive with another.
It's possible. That and weather.
And weather.
For Friday night football games in the fall, there's a lot of prayer by athletic directors that it doesn't rain on Friday night.
Because it's correct that in general most high school athletic departments, it's the football gate receipts that drive the funding of.
Yes, sir. That's the largest
in the most
income.
part.
Yes, sir.
And concessions. So a couple of rainy days or a one-win season could have a huge impact on how you have funding for next year's sports moving forward.
Yes, sir.
And there's actually a bending to that as well. If you're extremely successful, it can be a negative financial burden.
How?
There's a sweet spot, right? You want to go a certain depth in the playoffs, but you can go to the state championship, for example, and the way the income is distributed from those playoff games and from the state championship, it can be a cost. It can be a costly venture before you go to state championship.
Because you're
that
adding
was not
extra
true
games.
10 or 15 years ago. If you went there, it pretty well made your year for the next year. That's not true anymore. So there's actually, that thing bends on both ends. If you don't do well, going to be a problem with revenue. And if you do really well, there's some financial challenges that come with doing really well.
Mr. Lewis, if I could, before you go any further, we're out of time, so I'm going to, without objection, extend for 15. Hearing none, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks. I just have a couple more questions. So can we maybe talk for a second about in the arts, it looks like we allocate based on a per student basis. But in athletics, it looks like we allocate on a different basis. Is there a reason why we haven't decided to allocate athletics in the same way that we do the arts, so that every student at a school has some sort of allocation for high school athletics?
The only reason that we haven't proposed something like that is we focused our effort on, if you'll back up to that district athletic support. Is that the first slide?
Yes, sir.
Darryl? If you start in that first slide and you go to, what's the next slide? You go to those two slides, And Coach Nance also mentioned full-time athletic director. None of those things would have been true 12 years ago.
Okay.
So we focused all of our efforts on doing things that, while not directly allocating funds to those programs, what they've done is relieve schools of a cost burden.
Okay.
And there was also, you talked about the disparity in if you don't do well, as far as having money to go back into your program for the things they still pay for. Well, as you might imagine, the tremendous disparity when they had to pay for things like cutting the grass, properly maintaining the fields. In other words, top dressing them, using herbicide and fertilization at the appropriate points, all of which are really safety issues. So we have tried to concentrate our efforts on removing those financial burdens as opposed to going to some sort of allocation formula, although there is a small one at the middle school level, because when those programs were initiated, I think that was about 15, 16, maybe 17 years ago, their gates don't bring in enough to support an athletic program. So that was really almost a matter of necessity to do those. Certainly something going forward that we could consider and look at, but that what you see up there, that's been a pretty large commitment on the part of the district over a period of time. But our athletics and our programs are in much better shape because of that. And the other thing is the heavy cost in probably band and orchestra, and I think Brad probably made that point to a degree earlier, is with the instruments. Whereas most of the heavy costs in athletics are these things, and then their second largest cost would be the individual equipment. It probably costs, Darryl, $1,000, $1,200 now to outfit a football player. If you had to do it from head to toe at the outset.
At the outset, just under 1,000.
It's under 1,000. Which is the most expensive player to outfit because of the pads, the helmets, cloth goods, that sort of thing. So that's now probably the next largest expense, or the cloth goods and individual equipment for players, which normally schools do that on a rotating basis. They establish some sort of schedule internally to do that.
Well, and I would say, I mean, I remember when we voted to move a lot of this out of the school's expenses, which really were coming out of their booster club expenses, and it, at least as I talk to booster clubs, they're seeing, $40,000 to $50,000 that they're saving by not having to pay someone to go out and work on the fields, or they're seeing better fields than they were getting by with before they were doing it themselves. So I think this
both of those things, yes, sir.
I mean, I think both of those things make sense to me. I just wondered, and maybe it's not in the budget, but could the district consider perhaps using some of our fund balance for some allocations to schools to maybe offset some of these other one-time costs, like maybe in the same way that we did band equipment, could we do the same thing with football in the district? I don't know. I don't have a motion. I just would appreciate it if, as we explore how to use our fund balance, that one-time expenses for athletics could be considered.
Certainly, that would be something we could consider. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa?
Thank you. I wish you had stopped after the first presentation. Let me ask my questions, and then, so it wouldn't seem like I was asking so many questions. But maybe you did that on purpose. I don't know. So, with regard to athletics, what did we have strategic goals in the ed plan around athletics? Because I couldn't put my hands on them. I couldn't remember.
I don't think specifically.
Okay, I didn't think so either. So, what are our metrics that we're using? What are our goals with our program as we advance? Are we comparing ourselves to other districts? Are we comparing ourselves? Are we looking at student participation rate? How many students are taking advantage? Are we looking at, I know you have that correlation with the GPAs,
Right.
which is partially affected by that change in the uniform grading policy, but it's still going up, so that's great. What are your goals? What are you using to drive what we're doing and making changes so that we're getting better? What are the better
Right.
parts?
So student participation is clearly one of the main goals, is to get opportunities for these kids to play and to participate. Leadership opportunities for our athletic directors and coaches, to try to get them more certifications, to get them to invest in themselves and prepare themselves to be better coaches, to give a better opportunity for the kids as well. Obviously, we're going to push the academic component, because we are education-based athletics, and our coaches are doing a fabulous job of doing that. I can tell you, one of the schools in particular set a goal to get to that 4.0 level, and they did it this year. And they were just ecstatic. So, I mean, it's something that they did. That not only they want to do their participation, but they wanted to get to that 4.0 level, and they did that. And I know somebody's really happy about that over there.
So do we have programs, or do any of our schools have programs structured so that they're helping their athletes with academics?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
something that we're using, does that happen in every school, or is that just happening in some of our schools?
Well, I think it happens in almost every school, somewhat organically, but in several schools, it is a look at your GPA, look at what you're doing, and you're going to study hall before you go to practice, kind of thing.
And do we have minimum, do we have minimum GPAs across every sport that we?
The high school league sets that a minimum GPA of 1.0 in order to participate. But we don't have anyone close to that. Our coaches generally expect 2.0 or better, or something, a specific grade they'll look at.
Passing all your classes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would like to see next time this is presented, or just maybe in general, kind of what are our specific goals. So from our standpoint, looking at, because you pointed out you have participants, but you don't. That doesn't mean that we have that same percentage of students participating. It means we have that many people. I mean, we have some kids that are playing two or three sports. They're playing every season.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to see what our student participation rate is, and then look at that growth over time.
Right.
Because I agree, it's a connection for kids. So paying attention to how many students, not how many sports are being participated in, but how many students are taking advantage of that would be something I'd like to see.
It's about a 15% reduction. The number of duplicate and triplicate athletes has reduced so much over the last decade, really. It's significantly in the last 4 or 5 years. I have the one-time number.
So what is it for high school, you mean?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the percentage of our high school students that are participating?
I want to say it's in the almost 7,000, like 68 and 90, something like that, of high school 9 through 12 kids are playing at least one time.
So that's not a
And then they
percentage.
duplicate.
Do you know what the percentage is? Have you calculated that?
Not on my head. I'm not a math person. I'm a social
you
studies
said
guy.
that.
68, 90
Something like that.
would be in excess of 25%.
Yeah.
Okay. But you think that's tracking up or down over time?
It's pretty stable right now. It is. It's pretty stable.
Yeah. I mean, as we add opportunities, you won't necessarily see that, but I think
Right.
because we are investing so much money in athletics and in arts, paying attention to the number of students that are participating and watching how that tracks up and down also helps inform us about, to Mr. Lewis's point, we need to be spending a little more money here
Right.
versus there.
Right.
The whole conversation around our arts program came out of a presentation the board asked for regarding what's our participation rate look like, how does that compare to other districts, and we found we were woefully short on funding,
Right.
and we had some problems with our programs, and I think since then we're going gangbusters.
Right.
So paying close attention to what that number looks like and bringing that to us, I think would be helpful for us. I think what we're doing is phenomenal. The athletic directors that with full-time athletic directors we added. So you talked about the certifications, but the benefit they were going to be bringing is to be sure they helped with all those mechanics of running programs, et cetera, because it's hard to teach.
Yes, ma'am.
And then take care of the athletes. So is that working? We have a full-time athletic director with no teaching load in every high school?
They may opt to teach if they want to. I think 2 of our athletic administrators did teach 1 class this year, but the others are not teaching. They're basically full-time administrators of their athletic program. Some principals use them in some other ways, different, like they covered a lot of testing this spring, in times like that, but it's to help out. But that's fine.
Because we took that off our guidance counselors.
Yeah, we shifted it a little bit.
Now they moved, we'll have to talk about that too, I guess.
But I can tell you, for me, when I call them, they're there. When there's an issue, they're there. It's not that difficult. Sometimes they call, and I'm pretty sure they just don't want to answer the phone because it's me calling them. But no, it's not an issue. They're there. They're available. They're out to meet with their booster club folks. They're able to meet with sponsors. They're able to meet with guidance counselors. They're able to meet with coaches. They're able to mentor kids. It's been a very successful product.
So in terms of working with coaches, can you tell me how many non-teaching coaches we have right now?
Ooh,
So maybe just on a gut percentage.
it's in excess of 300. We have over 300 adjunct coaches.
Okay. So, one of the important parts to me of that full-time athletic director was because we did have so many
Right.
non-teaching coaches, being
Right.
sure that those coaches were trained. So
Yes, ma'am.
I would hope that part of what they're being able to do is work with those non-coaches.
Far fewer issues with that over the last 4 years since that has occurred.
Okay. So with the role of booster clubs, help me, you said it and I didn't write it down fast enough. So the booster clubs pay for uniforms, equipment?
Uniforms booster clubs are there to provide whatever extra support they can to the athletic department. Typically, an athletic director would meet with the principal, they'll create a budget for their athletic department, and then they'll give it out, and then they'll meet with their booster club and say, this is what we can cover, these are the extras we would like you guys to cover, and give a budget to the booster club, and they'll go out and try to raise funds to supplement, augment what the school can provide, get those extras.
Okay. So you're saying there's a local fund component that pays for?
Their gate receipts. First place
Yes.
they're going to go are their athletic
Right.
gate receipts. Then
Okay.
what that doesn't cover, they would ask booster clubs to help them make up the difference from that.
Okay. But, yeah, so that's concessions and whatever kind of
Right.
fundraiser.
Right.
I just used my last laundry detergent bit from, my big 5-gallon after a year and a half, I think. So I guess, what is that? That's uniforms, practice, equipment. Do we have, what are the other costs?
You have security cost, you have ticket sellers, ticket takers, you have officials in every sport, you have, except for tennis and golf, you have transportation if it goes beyond, if they go places beyond what that allocation covers, which the allocation is really based on their region travel.
Yes,
And
sir.
most people travel more than just a region.
Okay, so that's
Uniforms, and that would be anything from, the least expensive are tennis and golf. They have a tennis or a golf shirt usually, all the way up to football's the most expensive. A baseball catcher is probably the second most expensive, and then you kind of work your way down from that as you think about the different sports and the kinds of equipment, the cloth goods they wear, the kinds of equipment that they have, all the way down to things like how many hundred baseballs you have to buy, or footballs, basketballs. If you take students to tournaments, like invitational tournaments, there's a fee to register for that tournament. If you travel and it requires overnight stays or a meal, then you have travel costs. There are just all kinds of things that, as you think about all the activities in and around athletics, there's a dollar figure associated with just about all those things.
okay.
Field paint.
Hang on, Coach.
Yes, sir.
We have, Debbie, did you want to ask? Okay, so I've got 2 more after Mrs. Wells
Mr. Sutherland.
and 3, so without objection, we'll extend for another 15 minutes. Lisa.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess I'd like to understand the comparison of our district to others in terms of what they fund and what they do, if there's a way to do that. I mean, if we're talking about spending, if we're going to look at spending some fund balance, or if we might consider that, which I'm okay with, and I think that's a good idea, just understanding how we compare to other districts and what we spend. And Dr. Roster, to your point, we may need to take into account the fact that we're providing field maintenance and all those things, because I remember that was a significant investment that we made when we said we were going to start taking care of that. That and then just the strategic goals piece. If I can get numbers on what our participation, the number of students participating, because one concern I do have, you mentioned lacrosse and swimming as two sports that we don't have as much of. That's the lowest participation. So in both of those, I have heard that lacrosse is extremely expensive, and that the parents that are working, if their kids are doing lacrosse, they're dropping a ton of money. Now maybe it's in the uniform, maybe they're buying fancier uniforms or whatever, but
Well, lacrosse is a lot like baseball. In the past, for those of us who grew up in our day, the coach showed up with a bat bag, and they had all the bats in the bag and equipment in the bag. Now kids have their own bat bag and their own bats, and their own. Lacrosse is very much the same way. The kids go out and buy their own sticks, they buy their own padding, they buy their own stuff. So it's a very personalized expense for lacrosse.
yeah. So, and then on swimming, there's an access issue. So I think on those two sports in particular, maybe if there's an evaluation to really think about, is it an issue that students aren't interested in it, or is it an issue that there's not access, or there's some other issue around that? Because maybe we could consider some scholarships, having scholarships available or something, so to seed a program. So
Right.
if they wanted to start a
Well,
program.
the district did seed the lacrosse programs at all the high schools.
Okay. So they, some
When
of them
lacrosse
just didn't-
started, the district provided about $15,000 of equipment to every high school. And a couple of high schools had it for a year or two and then dropped it out of lack of interest.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So that's something to.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Wingate. So similarly, I'd love to know, well, first I'd love to see the Google slides, because I would be excited to kind of look at that, and that might answer some of my questions. But the percentage of student participation in these arts programs, are you looking, I know we've got a bunch more things we're offering, so are we looking at student participation, particularly at middle school and high school levels, so that we could do a comparison of we're growing by this amount? Because
Yeah, so I've kept pretty good records on the band programs, because that was kind of the first initial, focus that we had when I took over 6 years ago. So I can show you the growth rate of band from 2013 to now. I started keeping track of orchestra shortly after, about 2 years into the position. So those two particular ones, I can give you some historical data on, just in terms of the actual growth from year to year. In terms of chorus is a really hard one to get your arms around, because chorus, when you look at how schools schedule chorus, sometimes it's just more of an exposure. So kids, it may be second or third down on their list of choices, and so maybe they're put in the class that way. They may or may not be part of the performance group. It just kind of depends, So that one's a little more difficult to get your arms around. Theater obviously is one that would be easy to track, but when you start looking at theater, Drama 1 is also an exposure course. So sometimes really when you're looking at the theater programs, we're really talking more about like theater 2, 3, and 4, because those are the kids who continue beyond just being exposed. So it's a little different than with band or orchestra, because when you sign up for band, you sign up for orchestra, you've done it through middle school, and you're going to continue on.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, I'd love to look at that slide. Expenditures. Again, when we started this journey several years ago, part of the issue was we really weren't investing in our arts like we needed to.
Sure.
Do you know now how we compare to other districts like ours? If you go back to that presentation we got all those years ago, have you kept up with that?
I didn't do that. I think that was Diane Lee.
That was
but
before, yeah.
So I would say that we are ahead of some of the districts that are similar to us, and we're kind of neck and neck with some of the others. Specifically, Charleston County, we're ahead of them in a lot of ways, just in terms of what we're providing. I had a conversation yesterday with the arts coordinator from Horry County, and he was kind of picking my brain because I think he's in the process of making some requests and this, that, and the other, and they're a little ahead of us on some ends, but then we're far ahead of them on some others. So it really kind of depends, really, where you dive deep down into what are we providing specifically across each one of those and how we compare.
It's funny you should ask that. That's what I'd just like for you to kind of be aware of and do, and let us know if
Sure.
we're not in line. I mean, we said all those years ago that the arts is a priority for us, and funding these programs appropriately is how we ensure kids get the access.
Sure.
So just keeping an eye on that, how we're doing with other districts, and making sure we know would
Absolutely.
be great.
And something else, going back to Mr. Lewis's point that I meant to point out, the principals have been phenomenal, specifically like with instruments and stuff, and I'm going to use Mr. Williams as a great example. Because of the exponential growth in his program, I was able to do some stuff from my end that was not part of that 150, but then he also looked under every rock and every leaf and everywhere that he could find money to help support that program as well. So the principals are also doing a great job of supporting the programs in-house.
Okay. Well, I know one way they do that is through supplementing the transportation. So that was one question we have. We have $115,000 in transportation. So what does that cover, and how do we divvy that out?
Yeah, so that 115.5 covers all arts and all academics, and it's based off of a per pupil ratio, based off of the size of the programs. And so that's going to cover everything that's on those slides right there. Those programs have access to request funding at the school level from the principal, but that money goes to the school. The principal has access to it, and he or she can divide it up across all those programs that you see on this slide right here, however they see fit. So, for example, in some schools, speech and debate is huge, right? In other schools, it's a very small program. So their access to funding, through the pot of money that they get is going to look different. For example, Riverside has a huge speech and debate program, so I'm sure their cut of that transportation is going to look very different than a school with a smaller program. And the same thing goes for band and all of the others.
Okay. I know one thing that was in band that seemed to be sometimes difficult to manage is, bands travel a lot. If they're going to the Friday night football games and then they're going to competitions on Saturday. So that can end up being a chunk of change that a lot of times the principal didn't have enough money.
Right.
Or wouldn't commit enough money to provide that transportation. So,
I can tell you, when I was in the classroom, my booster club had to pay for our transportation because back then there was, transportation-wise, there was nothing that was provided at all,
Okay.
But that was, 10 years ago.
So that seems like a low number to me, given what you just said about it's supposed to provide a supplement for all of.
So the way that we came up with that number was the year that this was added, we surveyed all the schools, and I asked them specifically, where have you traveled over the last 2 years? Give me places, I need the number of miles, and then we did our very best to try to approximate a calculation for each individual program across all the schools. Now that was done, like I said, 3 years ago. And again, the groups are not going to travel to the same place every single year, but at least gave us an idea of where to start.
Okay. So maybe if you do that sort of evaluation again, because what I know from talking to some of the different band programs is there are places that they would like to go. They'd like to be able to send more of their kids to all the football games, but they don't have the money, so they don't. So again, just reevaluating where we are, lining up with what we said are our priorities and what you know is important for those programs, and being sure that we are aware of what that looks like. So similarly, on the strategic, do we have goals in the strategic ed plan that are specific to arts?
So there's one goal in there, and it's actually for the gifted and talented artistic students. So basically to be able to further identify students that are artistically gifted and talented. And I'm working on that.
Okay. All right. So if I'll look at back at that presentation we had done before, if that helps in me providing you kind of what data I'd like to see.
Sure, absolutely.
But thank you. I appreciate the work you guys have done.
Thank you.
As we know in Greenville County Schools, academics is number one, but I appreciate all the work that's gone in the last several years to really enhancing our arts programs and our athletics programs to support our students. I think they're more successful. I think that affects our graduation rate in a major way. I think that's why it's gone up. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Meek, then Mrs. Bush, Mr. Sudduth, and Mrs. Morrison Fair.
Thank you. I don't want to get down in the weeds too much, but we all know that some schools have better booster club than others have. Do we have any idea how much money is generated by the two ends of the schools, the two ends of the spectrum, the lowest and the highest?
Do you want athletics, arts, or both?
All of them.
All of them.
I think that would be a question that Mr. Knotts would best answer, and he's not here this morning.
He already left?
No, not for good. No, sir. But I think we could probably get you some numbers there and send them to you, but he would most likely know that. I don't know that you all would necessarily.
Well, I think everybody will agree that some of the schools who are low in numbers, their booster clubs are low in dollars, and those that are high in numbers will have higher booster clubs, or those in different areas. And what I've never understood is why we give the schools, all the participants, the same amount of monies, per participant, because we know that the uniform you're talking about earlier for $1,000 is going to cost both those schools $1,000 each. They're not going to get one for $100 and the other. So I've always said that we should have a different way, a prorated way that we can provide to those schools, same as transportation. A lot of the schools don't participate because it's very difficult for the parents or whomever to provide these equipments, instruments, or whatever they're having to provide. Although, I'm sure you can look at the areas and see where lacrosse is more prevalent than others because of the cost. And I don't think anyone is going to dispute that. So we have always known that, but we've never really delved into it to solve the problem. And I sincerely think it's very unfair for us as a district to treat everybody the same, because they're not the same. And it's unfortunate. There's been many different discussions about some schools that may have large amount of monies on hand and others don't have any, and we should pool it. I disagree with that, because I want the parents to support the schools, and I don't want to take away from that, but we ought to come up a way with our district. And since we have such fine directors and such a fine superintendent, and I know we can find that, and so I would love to see that come to fruition before I leave this board sometime in the future, in the next 20 years. So I appreciate y'all looking at that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Bush.
Thank you. Some of mine, a lot of mine have already been answered, but this is phenomenal, being able to see especially the impact, and I think, as Ms. Wells said, that it's had on our graduation rates, on the GPA, the challenge, because I can remember vividly the days when athletes were told to dumb down their classes, and because it could hurt their eligibility. And so to see this district go from that to this, and most of all, the story that you shared with us about the students realizing how important that was to them, that we'll get them next year. And it's not on Friday night on the field. It's we're going to get them. We're going to study hard. We're going to form some study groups. We're going to work on those items. I have a couple of random things, and I agree as well with Ms. Wells about that kind of deep diving, because just one of the things I picked up is like two of the schools is Carolina and TR that don't have orchestras, and why, just kind of why would those particular schools not have orchestras? is it just not an interest, simply not an interest, or is there something we could do with those schools to help support and promote those types of issues?
Ms. Bush, I'm sorry, but
That's fine.
without objection, we'll extend for another 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. And then also, one of the things that I would like to see us work on is, and I know that you agree with me in looking at the middle school and the high school band programs and who has a middle school band program and who has a strong, the basis for that strong high school program is always going to be that strong middle school program. And I think that might be somewhere that we need to look at that inequity that Mr. Meek talked about, is if we can help those middle schools grow those band programs, then it is only naturally going to strengthen the band program in high school. And I have always, one thing I would like for us to work on is that turf war that is kind of still out there between, because honestly, as a band parent from middle school through Furman, I have always thought it was so nice that the band let the football team use the band field on Friday nights to play their ball games. So, but I know that there are still a lot of turf wars that go on out there about who's going to sell what and what's going to be sold and who's got that. And I know that we've come a long way on that, but I'm still getting some calls between, you know, the football team says we can't set up and sell our T-shirts, and so when we do something like that, it promotes everybody. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the cheerleaders. Sometimes it's just that little bit of attention of when we strengthen one program, we strengthen all of those programs. And I thank you very much.
There was a question on the front end of that, Ms. Bush, I believe, about TR
Yes.
Orchestra
Yes.
and Carolina Orchestra. I think, if I remember correctly, Betty, one of the speculations about the Carolina Orchestra is the large number of students. Basically, their feeder is Tanglewood.
Right.
And it's the huge band presence at Tanglewood that we believe,
Possibly.
we think that may relate to why there's no orchestra presence.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The orchestra program at both of the middle schools phased out first, and this was at least 10 years ago, maybe
Okay.
12 years ago. And then, of course, once it phased out at the middle school level, it eventually phased out, you know, at the high school level. I definitely believe that, you know, that there's a possibility that there may be interest there, but, you know, obviously that takes that's going to take time to build. You know, and it's not going to be a quick fix, because if you have to start with beginners, you have one of two options. Either you hire a full-time person and then you tell them you teach beginners all day long and you start beginners at every grade level, or you phase in one grade level at a time, you know, as you start them in sixth grade. So, but to Dr. Royster's point, there is a huge band program at Tanglewood that has been built over the last 8 years or so, 9 years, that didn't exist when orchestra was there the first time.
And I don't have any, Bailey may have, I don't have any particular insight in that situation at TR, but to the point of starting those programs, we do have, some of the allocations come off the school's allocation for teachers, but Bradley does have some within his budget, some
Okay.
teacher allocations. So if someone that didn't have it wanted to start it, we could
Great.
certainly do that.
All mine are spent, so.
Great. All right, thank you.
Mr. Sudduth?
Mr. Wingate,
Yes, sir.
what happened to our newspapers in our high school?
That's an excellent question. When I took over handling supplements from Bill Utze several years ago, because Bill used to handle all of the supplements, athletics and arts and academics, I was actually surprised to see that there were only 6 high schools that offer newspaper. We have tried to make it a lot more accessible. Rather than doing a printed newspaper, we've agreed that they could do an online newspaper if they wanted to, something digital. It is a class that meets during the day, but I think for a lot of reasons, there's a lot of different options and opportunities for students. There's multimedia classes. There's just a lot more options than what we used to have when newspaper was offered in every school. But I was surprised when I saw that there were only 6 schools.
Are we doing anything to encourage schools to have newspapers?
So, we do provide a supplement for the schools, for any school who has, a desire to have that. And really that rests back at the school level, for the principals and the teachers, if there's anything there. But we do provide, like I said, at least the monetary support in terms of providing a supplement for the teacher, because we do understand that they have to work beyond the regular school day for, events after school and, all of that.
I'm trying to understand why a school would not have one.
Yeah.
And there's always got to be interest, hasn't there?
Like I said, I really don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure why. I mean, I certainly could poll the schools to see, if there is any sort of deterring factor that would keep them from wanting to have one.
Is there anything, Dr. Loyster, we could do to encourage?
I think while there might be some things that principals could do within their school to encourage writing and reporting, I think we're probably seeing the phasing out of the printed newspaper. And so I think the attraction for students to print journalism as far as actually producing a paper newspaper, we're probably seeing the end of that. Now, that's not to say there shouldn't be an interest there in students writing and then maybe transmitting it electronically through some sort of blog or something like that. And I think that's probably going to have to come about through their English classes and generate interest that way. But I think the days when every school had a folding newspaper that came out anywhere from every 2 weeks to every 4 weeks to every 6 or 9 weeks, I think that's probably something that we're beginning to see the end of.
To look at that, then I've got to have a device if I'm going to do some kind of digital.
Yes, sir.
newspaper.
And if you were thinking that you might be going to pursue the writing of those kinds of things as a career, that's the way you're going to be doing it as well. So the things are parallel, one with the other.
Well, then the same thing's going to be happening to the annual.
I think you're probably correct. There's still more of a desire to have that actual book, but they're available now on an online version. I think Eric's still sitting. He's still sitting there. Do you all do that at Wade Hampton?
We do online newspaper.
Online annual?
Annual is still a hardcover print copy, but we are seeing a decrease in sales.
They give you an option for an online version of the annual. So I think that over time that's going to be electronic as well.
How do you sign an online version of the annual?
You got me, Coach.
Yeah.
You post on their Facebook page.
I guess you just post on it. Yeah, you can use your stylus.
What 6 schools have a newspaper?
That I don't know. Mr. Wingate probably
Yeah,
does.
Nancy, do you still have it up?
Okay, the 6 schools with a newspaper are Carolina, Greenville, Greer, Southside, TR, and Wade Hampton.
One more time, please, Ms. Principal.
Yes, sir.
Carolina, Greenville, Greer.
Carolina, Greenville, Greer, Southside, TR, and Wade Hampton.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mrs. Morrison-Fair.
Thank you. Two short questions, hopefully. And we've discussed this. I think two people have asked, what do we get with the $1,808? What does that buy me?
So that is anything that the band programs need for operating expenses. And, you know, a marching band's budget can be anywhere from $25,000 upwards of 60, 70, 80,000, depending on the size of the program and all of that. So we do not specify exactly what it has to be used for. Is for any of those uses that they have. You know, for example, that may include you know, some additional flags for color guard, or they may need to buy some reeds or paint for the practice field, or, you know, any of that stuff. Mm-hmm.
And because that's not very much money at all. Then I have a question for athletics. I would like to see some type of accountability plan for academics across the board, coming from the athletic directors at each school. I know you mentioned that the students have an average that they have to maintain, but my interest lie in what does that include, what does that look like when they're requiring that the students are academically you know, qualified to go to the next level, not just on the high school level.
There'd be two things there, Ms. Morrison-Fair. There'd be the academic eligibility requirements of South Carolina High School League, and then there would be the NCAA core course requirements to go to the next level. Is that the question that you're asking?
Somewhat, but I'm thinking more in the line of, if you play athletics, what do the coaches do to make sure that our students are meeting those requirements and making sure those grades are where they're supposed to be? I talk to so many people across the board where we have people in athletics and they're barely making the grade in the classroom. So I want to make sure that that's first and foremost in addition to playing athletics.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your presentation. Our next item of business in order is item 2.03, innovative course approvals. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Get to the right section. Mr. McCoy has, I believe, 2 course approvals. One's an honors level course for Spanish, and the other is an AVID college experience course. Mr. McCoy?
Yes, sir. So we're bringing these 2 courses to you now. Typically, we bring those to you in February and October. The State Department did not release the Spanish rubric for honors until this past March. I know Dr. Bala-Connor has been asking about Spanish honors, or foreign language honors, but we were unable to do those courses until the State Department released the honors rubric. So that happened in March, and we had a group of teachers who wanted to go ahead and write the course for Spanish 2 honors to get that moving. And then around that same period of time, Southside High School was also granted a grant through AVID to implement the AVID course at Southside High School. So that also occurred after the February window when we approved courses. So those are the 2 courses you have before you. Spanish 2 is just an honors level. You will, again, like several other honors courses, you'll see more artifacts or can see more artifacts after that course is taught. As a reminder, we've never had foreign language honors courses at the level 1 and 2 before. So they chose at this point to start with level 2. They will probably do a level 1 Spanish honors, but they needed more time to look at the requirements and whether or not that course could support an honors level going forward.
Are there any questions? Okay. Let's see. There is a recommended motion from the administration. Is there a maker? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay.
Those local board courses as presented.
Okay. Have a motion properly made and seconded. Any discussion related to the motion? Ms. Wells?
Yeah, so one just kind of clarifying on the Spanish 2, the way I read the impact statement was that the State Department issued a Spanish honors rubric. What you're saying is they issued the honors rubric, and we've written our curriculum.
Correct.
Okay, 'cause at first I thought it was
Sorry.
a state, okay. So
No,
it's
no.
not a state Spanish honors curriculum, it is
No, it's just
ours based on the state honors rubric.
for
Did you-
foreign language.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the other thing is understanding the AVID. So I've been to a couple different presentations on AVID over the years and have talked to those folks, and I think it's fabulous. It's really geared to dropout prevention and helping students grow academically. But as I understand it, it is a program, not a course. So in this write-up, it says that we may be considering bringing the curriculum to Greenville County Schools, and that would be specifically at Southside?
So there's two versions of AVID. So one of the kind of gateways, I guess you would call it, before a school goes full implementation of AVID is that they can offer, and some schools only choose to offer the high school elective course on AVID. So yes, it is, as you said, it is a program, and schools that are implementing the full program actually implement that across the entire school where all the teachers are trained in the AVID strategies and implement the AVID strategies. Other schools choose just to implement the elective course. And so this particular grant was focused on implementing that elective course in the school. So certainly if we find that that's successful at Southside, we could certainly look at, is that something we would want to take school-wide at Southside? But this one does focus just on the elective course, probably about 150 kids that would be participating in that.
Okay, are we talking about kids at the 9th grade? What level? Are we talking about 9th grade kids or?
Yeah, so it's ideally you focus on 9th grade because the whole point of the AVID is trying to get kids prepared for college who are going to college. So really getting those kids the academic strategies they need to be successful. So I wouldn't say this first year it'll be solidly only 9th grade because there may be some other 10th grade students they put in there, but typically it would be a tiered approach, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th as the kids go up.
Okay, and if you're talking about 150 kids, you're talking about a significant number at Southside.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be all freshmen, obviously. So they would be pulling in some other kids from other courses who maybe who want to go to college, but maybe are struggling with some of the course grades and course strategies. So as you probably know, it does a lot of course or college strategies for kids to help them get through college.
Right.
And high school.
So I saw in the syllabus that they mentioned that they're going to use Tigers Teaching Tigers as one of their pieces of this class. So is that something that's come out of their IB evaluation where they're trying to partner so that they can increase their IB numbers and grow their IB program?
Yeah, so the last evaluation for IB really across all of our IB schools was that they need to try to increase the number of IB diploma graduates, and Southside has seen a decline in that as well the last couple of years. And so that was one of their strategies they're using to look at how do they increase kids in that IB diploma. And of course, the big part of that is getting the kids the right grades they need to get in order to get in those advanced classes. And so this is one of those, hopefully, strategies that will help the kids perform at a higher level where they can get into those IB diploma classes.
Okay. Well, certainly since we did away with the MYP program, we talked about making sure we had some things in place. So.
And this would be one of those things. We also do a lot of work now with the middle schools as far as trying to identify those kids even in 6th grade, which we really never did with MYP, because we had two separate coordinators. Now that coordinator is really going down there and trying to follow those kids in a cohort, hopefully we'll be able to get them earlier into the advanced classes in 6th grade.
Okay. Well, I think it's a great program. I guess you guys will bring us something on the AVID program as a whole if you start looking at implementing it, just so we understand the whole program and the cost. Okay. And I guess the opportunity then would be that this AVID course could be offered at our other high schools that have IB programs as well, right?
Technically anybody could offer the course technically. There's obviously costs and training requirements and all that kind of stuff, but yes, anybody once it's in the catalog can offer the course.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Sutton, without objection, are there any other questions other than Mr. Sutton? Then without objection, we'll extend for 5 minutes. Coach?
Mr. McCoy, the AVID elective That seems to be interesting. I was looking at the mission, and it says to ensure that all students, and especially the least served students. What are the least served students?
So typically, Mr. Sutton, those would be your students that we would consider the at-risk students, so who may have come from backgrounds with adverse experiences, or students who may, a lot of times poverty is going to be students who are at risk in poverty. Typically, those students may not have the background knowledge to go into advanced classes or have the strategies that AVID teaches to be successful in either school or college. And so they really focus on those underserved populations of students who may traditionally not perform.
Would that be dealing more with motivation or with ability?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Would that be more in dealing with the motivation? When we're talking about the least served, we're saying that they're the ones that are not motivated, if I understand you correctly.
Well, so I wouldn't say not motivated. I would say a lot of times the students have, let's take a student who lives in poverty. A lot of times our students who are in poverty move from school to school to school a lot of times. And every time that happens, students lose academic knowledge. I mean, they're coming and going constantly, so that's a huge disruption. So they have large gaps in their background when it comes to academics. And so I wouldn't say it's motivation for those kids. I'd say they have a lack of background knowledge, and they may be behind slightly or a lot because of maybe possibly being in poverty and moving around a lot. And there's a lot of other adverse effects that can affect children. So this is trying to level that playing field and give those kids the skills that maybe other students would have learned prior.
Well,
So
one of their targets, Coach Oath, is families where there is no college tradition. In other words, first generation to college. They not only talk about people in poverty or students in poverty, but they talk about students who have within their family, they have no history, no record of anyone going to college. In fact, in many cases, they may be first generation graduating from high school. So some of the skills and traits that students gain at home when they have a history within their family of going to college, these students don't have that. They've never had the exposure to that. So it's a framework of the kinds of skills that you need to have be successful academically in the present, whether that be, and it goes all the way down into middle school, whether that be in middle school or high school or subsequently if you choose to go to college. It helps with a strong academic framework at all those levels.
So the only thing it's encouraging is college. It's not encouraging skill building.
No, sir.
No, sir. It encourages strong academic performance wherever you are and in the future. So if you're involved in an AVID program in the middle school level or in the high school level, it encourages and strengthens you academically where you are. And if you choose to go on to college, and when you think about college, we need to, I think, always remind ourselves we're not talking about just four-year college. We're talking about four-year colleges and two-year colleges. So it could be someone pursuing a technical degree, but it helps you with the academic skills to be successful in the present and in the future.
Yeah, I just saw here where it said it would increase the enrollment in four-year colleges.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
And that's
sir.
one of the objectives.
Yes, sir. That's
It said nothing
AVID's
about
objective.
A
That's one of,
technical school or a two-year college.
yes, sir. So that's one of AVID objectives. And so one of the reasons in the past, and I agree with Ms. Wells, that the AVID program is extremely strong. One of the things we've worked with them in the past, or I've worked with several of the consultants who have looked to bring something like this to Greenville County, is that in the past they have heavily focused on four-year colleges. So we have been working with them, one person particularly, on how does that fit in with the mission of our G+ initiative here in Greenville. But in ninth grade, as Dr. Royster said, in ninth grade, a lot of our students who are struggling in ninth grade don't believe that college is in reach for them. And so again, if you can put some strategies in place for them, get the students some success, a lot of times those students all of a sudden realize that college is an opportunity, is in reach for them. And so in those early grades, we're trying to prepare kids for whatever path they might take, whether it be college, 2-year, or go out right away from high school and do a career.
Are we doing this in the middle school?
No, sir. Right now, the only place this is in Southside.
All right.
Will be.
So we started with just with one school.
Yes, sir.
What kind of a teacher certification will teach that?
I believe any certification, if I'm correct, I'd have to look it up in the state manual, but I believe any certified teacher can teach the course.
So the physical education teacher can teach it.
Yes. I'd have to double check with the state cert manual.
That's correct, and now they have to have the AVID training.
Correct. They have to be trained.
It would be nice to see how well this is done a year down the road or whenever. It sounds very interesting, but yet when I look at it, and then I always wonder how are we going to get the students that really have no interest to develop an interest. And so I want to see how this would develop the interest for those who have no interest. So maybe as we go down the road, we can get some kind of look at how effective it is, how well we're doing it, and I'll assume it's a year-long course?
It can be year-long or semester, depending upon the school schedule. Yes, sir.
Well, but one Carnegie unit.
Yes, sir. It's one unit of credit.
It's an elective unit.
I'm sorry?
It's an
Yes,
elective unit?
Yes, elective unit, yes.
What foreign languages do we teach in high schools?
Hang on a minute, is that your last question, Pat? Because I need to extend if we're not.
Mm-hmm. That's the
Okay,
last question.
go ahead.
So at the high school currently, we are teaching German, French, and Spanish.
And Latin at Greenville High.
Yes, and sorry, Latin at Greenville High.
German, French, and Spanish?
And Latin at one of our schools.
You would have made Ann happy.
Used to have two. Greer and Greenville High.
This is a Spanish 2 course. What about in German and French? Do we have a 1, 2, 3, or what?
Yes, sir. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, all those levels, and most likely certainly the French is going to be looking at where they create honors levels at 1 and 2. But because the rubric came out so late this year at the state, that will be something they tackle next year.
Do other Spanish courses, are they honors courses? Is there Spanish 1 honors?
No, so there's only Spanish 3 and 4 honors, and French 3 and 4, and German 3 and 4 at this point.
So now we're trying to make the Spanish 2, 3, and 4.
Yes, they're all ideally the foreign language of the state uniform grading policy change now allows us to offer honors level courses at the level 1 and 2 courses. So that's what we're going back and looking at, which courses to make honors.
So already we have the German 2 through 4 and the French through.
No, sir, we only have 3 and 4. Right now, the only foreign language honors classes we have is a 3 and 4 level.
So we've got 3 and 4 in German,
Yes, sir,
and we got 3 and 4 in French.
and Spanish,
We've been
and Latin.
We've been permitted to have honors level courses at 3rd and 4th year for several years now. It's recently been a decision by the state that you could submit for honors level credit for level 1 and level 2 foreign languages, but they send a rubric out. In other words, they send a framework or a guide out to us, and we have to match up with that in order to give credit below the 3rd year of foreign language. And this is, I believe, the first
Correct.
level 1 or level 2 that we've prepared to for students to be able to receive honors credit.
Correct.
Do we have the same option in French and German?
Not
Yes.
yet, but
A level 2 honors?
not yet. This is the first one.
Yes, we have the option to build those, which we'll be looking at this year.
The state already has those?
No, sir, we have to build those. So we'll look at French and German 1 and 2 levels this coming year.
The state says this is what it has to look like, then we have to build it. They do not have an approved state level foreign language 1 or 2 honors course.
So all of this presentation on this Spanish 2 honors, we developed it?
Yes, sir. Mr. McCoy and his staff did.
Well, there's a state standard, Spanish 2 CP level, and there's a Spanish 2 honors level. The difference in that?
Yes, sir, there is a difference, but yes, the state requires us to have a difference between the two courses. There has to be a difference between CP and honors.
What's the difference?
Mr. Sutter, I'd have to, I'm not a foreign language person, so I'd have to get the teachers who wrote that course to, but it's outlined in there on a column, the two differences.
Yes, sir, I see it outlined, page after page after page.
Right.
Yes, sir,
I can't.
that is the difference.
I'm trying to see, what seems to be the problem. I can understand simple instruction from a doctor, which is, but I can understand simple instruction from a doctor and respond accordingly.
Correct.
Interesting. Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? We have a motion on the floor, properly made and duly seconded. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. This concludes the instruction portion of today's agenda. Our next item of business is related to administration, which will be chaired by Mrs. Grayson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 3.01, revision to board self-evaluation instrument. This item is presented by Mrs. Morrison-Fair for information only.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson. The committee was given the task to create a document for the purpose of the board's self-evaluation. After much discussion, a lot of committee meetings, the committee decided to align the new document with the district's strategic education plan, the NSBA's 8 characteristics of effective school boards, and the superintendent's evaluation. You have before you in board docs a copy of the final draft of that plan. And at this point in time, we will take questions. Before that, I would just like to really thank Nancy and Sherry and Gail for all of their work and help with this committee. So at this point in time, we will take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison-Fair. Mr. Sutter?
This Greenville County Schools Board of Trustees self-assessment, we developed this?
That's, for me, a joy, for me.
Mr. Sutter?
Let me see, whoever was in charge of it, who was this committee, Glenda Morrison-Fair is the chair, so I'm assuming to you.
Okay.
I'm looking here, Glenda, at this 2-page, 3-page assessment. Is that something that we put together, or is it something we got from somewhere?
No, the committee put that together.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you. Just a couple of clarifying questions, and I'm happy to direct those to Ms. Morrison-Fair if that's okay. The first question is, this is being presented for information only. What's the path from it getting from here? Is it going to the board for a vote next, or is it going back to committee and then coming back to us to vote on it at the Cal?
This will go to the board for a vote.
At the June board meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so it's being presented for information only here, but it's going directly to the board for the board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So just a couple of questions that I'd appreciate some understanding on. So one, I really appreciate that you guys did use the framework for the National School Board Association's 8 characteristics of highly effective boards. So I think that is a really good framework for using here. There were a couple of things, though, in the 8 characteristics that aren't in this, and I just wondered if maybe we could just talk a little bit about. So one is in section 3. This is about accountability and spending less time on operations and more time on policy. There's a phrase in their summary that talks about poor governance is characterized by factors such as micromanagement of the board. That was in the 8 characteristics, but it's not in here. It seems like that phrase would be really important as a reminder for this board to remember that a highly effective board doesn't focus on micromanagement. Can we maybe talk for a second about maybe was the decision made to leave that off, or was it just an oversight, and could it be added back in?
Well, as far as that is concerned, we did discuss that, and I will ask my other committee member to chime in, and that's Ms. Debbie Bush. But we did discuss that, and we felt like in this board self-assessment that we should follow protocol with making sure that we hold the superintendent accountable and that the superintendent is responsible for any changes or day-to-day operations with the district.
Ms. Bush?
Yes. We did have some discussion about that. As a matter of fact, through, I think, a process of meetings, we had several things in there that we turned around and removed, and that was one of those things because we felt like we should focus on the more positive attributes and what the things that we should do, which is build relationships with the superintendent. There was some things in the communications piece, and not have those items in there that said, like, bad performing boards do this, that we didn't want to do that. That should basically be, I mean, that is covered in the 8 priorities, but we felt like as we did that final scan over it, that those bad boards do this things really stood out as a something that we didn't want to focus on, that we wanted it to be about doing what good boards do and assessing ourselves as to as to those different items.
Since this is for information only, I just would respond with a comment that micromanagement of the board has been an ongoing concern of this board and of the South Carolina School Board Association, of boards in general. And I think it would be a really positive statement for this board to clarify that we do not support micromanagement as an action of this board. So rewriting it as a positive statement makes perfect sense. I do remember the conversation when we took other things out because they were negative statements. But it just seems like we're missing an opportunity here to drive home that point that we as a board don't believe that that's our role. But I just appreciate it if it could be considered before it's brought to the board. The other one I would just suggest, if possible, is the 8 characteristics of effective boards do talk about a strategic ed plan, but they also talk about a budget. And there are sections in here where we talk about financial management, but we don't specifically refer to the budget as a tool that we use to monitor the success of this organization. And so I would just recommend that in Section 7, which specifically talks about the board leading a united front with the superintendent, that somewhere in that section, when we refer to the ed plan, that we also refer to the budget and to the board-approved policies, because really those are the 3 legs of the stool that we use to govern this organization. And so the ed plan, while it is incredibly important and certainly sets our vision, if we don't put money in the budget, it ain't going to happen. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge that tool has a role in us monitoring a relationship with the superintendent, but also in board policy, we can be in conflict with ourselves, and so I think it's important that we use board policy as that effective 3rd leg. So I would just recommend that board policy and our annual budget be mentioned somewhere in Section 7, since there are 3 documents that we regularly review. But I appreciate the time that this group has spent, and I look forward to approving it when it's ready. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Wells?
Yes, so similarly, I think it is important to point out to integrate the policy and the budget piece, as Mr. Lewis mentioned in number 7. I think I'd never thought about it like that. It's our 3-legged stool that we use to support what we do. So I like that. I might have to use it again, Mr. Lewis. With regard to, I love the tool, I love the instrument. We did some morphing of this over the last 3 or 4 years. We've used these characteristics to talk about our self-evaluation, even though we've used the state school board's document. So I'm excited that we're really expanding and we're going to embrace the NSBA. With regard to poor governance and micromanagement, when I looked at number 3, the last 2 bullets say the board operates according to written policies, which it updates as necessary, and it says the next one is the board follows its prescribed role as a policy body and does not become involved in making administrative decisions. So I like the way that frames what our role is and doesn't speak to micromanage or not. I want to say this carefully because I believe that the SCSBA is the backbone of our boards and has provided so much great work in helping school board members navigate. I certainly, the first year I went, learned a ton and asked a ton of questions because I had no idea what a school board member was supposed to do and be. But with regard to how we've focused our efforts and times, I would say in my time on the board, unfortunately, I think we've focused too much on telling school board members what they shouldn't do. And I believe that is a direct, the reflection of that is in what's happened with our school boards across the state. When you have school board members that here don't micromanage, they haven't asked their superintendent the right questions. They haven't dug into their budget. They haven't paid attention to their policy. And school boards are being taken over across the state of South Carolina, not because they micromanage the superintendent or the district. So I believe what we have here can set a standard and maybe be something that the School Board Association would take and integrate and maybe change their tool. They've already changed how they're doing some of their training so that they're helping equip school board members with what questions should you ask about finance and how should you look at data. And they're moving to this same sort of idea that we have to proactively talk about what we're going to do, not about what we're not going to do. And so this tool as it sits, I think does exactly that. And so I would agree with the group that brought this to us that we really have to keep it focused on what we should do and quit making what we do about don't ask this question and don't do this and don't micromanage. So I love it the way it is and look forward to supporting it when it comes to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Mr. Sailors?
Well, since we're talking about the one topic, first of all, I appreciate the comments prior. And to Ms. Wells' point about the State Association establishing a mindset of being more proactive than reactive, that is correct. But there's also the delicate balance of do's and don'ts. And I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Lewis in the fact that this should be referenced in some way possible, because I'll use a local board that can be a perfect example of what one election can do to take a positive, proactive, unified body and split it right down the middle. And that's Anderson 2. Where you, in one election, you now have a board split evenly down the middle over the disposition of a contract for the superintendent. And the principal complaint on both sides is the fact that the new members of the board are micromanaging the administration. If we list it as a don't, that takes nothing away from the do's, but it sets a very clear example of where this board's expectation is for the future. Although we may tweak this document in the future, we may adjust it as we need to in the future. Once this document is in place, I would certainly assume, considering all the work that this committee's put into it, it's going to be around for a while. So I would respectfully request that we do include some phraseology related to mismanagement or micromanagement, because quite frankly, it's a clear message that sends not to us, but to those that could follow us in the future. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Mr. Meek?
Thank you, but I do like to micromanage, no matter what the language is. To the committee chair, over the open-ended questions at the end, Ms. Morrison-Fair, the second bullet point where it's got under what circumstances do you feel inhibited from doing your best? Inhibited whom? Who you addressed? Inhibited you? Or shouldn't there be another word there? It seems to me like it just sort of open-ended there.
Okay, which one is that?
Second bullet point,
The second?
where it says at the, after the parentheses, or after the, whatever it is, do you feel inhibited from doing your best work as a trust? Is that correct?
I'm not an English major, so I have to.
I'm not either, far from it.
Tommy Reese's.
No. Yeah.
Terry is.
Mr. Meeks, what are you suggesting?
I'm not making a suggestion. That's your job there. I was just saying it just doesn't flow right for me. Do you feel inhibited from your doing your best work? I don't know. It just, yeah, something. I don't want to micromanage the question. That's right. But if y'all good with it, I'm good with it. I'm just saying that's the third bullet point where you got what do you consider to be the strengths of the board as a whole, which is okay. But how come you're not asking what are the weaknesses of the board as a whole is? Why don't you ask that?
So you're focusing on
Number three.
You do not understand what that's asking.
No, I'm saying why don't you ask what the weaknesses of the board is also? No, it's not very clear. Do what?
What are you asking?
On the third bullet point, you said, what do you consider to be strengths of the board as a whole? Why is the committee not suggesting also to ask what the weaknesses of the board are? And I know the next bullet point sort of goes into it a little bit, but not very direct, I don't think.
Can I interrupt just 1 second? How many more questions do you have, Mr. Meek?
Oh, this is it.
Okay. And Ms. Leventis Wells, how much time do you need?
Okay.
Okay. And Ms. Cooper-Cobble?
Okay.
How many? Okay. I'm going to extend for 10 minutes. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Meeks,
Okay.
I'm not.
Go ahead, Mr. Morrison-Fair.
Okay, Mr. Meeks, I'm not quite sure how to answer your question.
Okay.
I'm not sure that number 3. What do you consider to be the strengths of the board as a whole?
Yes.
I'm not understanding what your objections are.
Why does the committee not suggest that we ask what the weaknesses of the board are also?
Why don't we say weaknesses and strengths? Well,
Or make another bullet point or whatever with that?
we thought, as Ms. Bush said, that we would keep it on a positive level. And pretty much you're free to write whatever you want to write. So those are open-ended questions. So if you feel like the board has weaknesses, we would like to see that too. But we wanted to focus on the positives that the board had to offer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Ms. Leventis Wells.
Thank you. Kind of, what do you consider to be opportunities for improvement for the board as a whole, and where could we focus more effort? I would look at that as maybe a weakness.
Oh, I do too, but.
Yeah, so, I don't want to be, I'm going to agree. I would hate to be too negative in this. I think we focus on the strengths, but we also look at opportunities to improve. And so I'm looking at that as a different way of saying what are our weaknesses. So with that being said, also, I too am not one for micromanaging. I've never been in favor of that in all my years in education as well as administration. In all positions I've incurred with boards that I served and people that oversaw us. I look at giving people opportunities to lead and make wise decisions because we put these people in positions. So as far as me micromanaging, I am not in favor of being micromanaged, and nor would I want anyone else to be. Overseeing, that's one thing. Managing, sure. Open discussion as to why I may or may not agree, absolutely, but not micromanaging. I do not know everything that's involved in the position or everything that's involved in the situation, so who am I to micromanage? So I'm going to agree with maybe putting that in there. So that's all I wanted to say, and I thank this committee for working diligently on this, and I think you've all done a fantastic job. Thank you.